A millionaire finds a 6-year-old girl hiding in his garage, shaking with fear and completely mute. He takes her inside, offering food and shelter, but she remains in absolute silence. The next morning, she appears beside his bed, watching him. When he finally convinces her to draw something on paper, what she draws leaves him speechless. The rain hammered the roof of the black Mercedes like desperate fists begging for shelter. Edward Stone drove through the deserted city streets, his tired eyes reflecting the lonely flicker of traffic lights in the early Tuesday morning. At 42, he had built a financial empire few could rival, but at that moment, all he felt was the familiar weight of loneliness pressing on his chest like an invisible hand. The mansion gate opened automatically, recognizing his approach. Edward parked in the spacious garage, where 5 other luxury cars remained impeccably lined up, like soldiers in formation. The automatic lights flickered on, bathing the space in a cold, white glow that made his temples throb even harder. 16 hours of consecutive meetings had left his mind in tatters, but this was what kept the ghosts of the past at bay. He turned off the engine and remained seated for a few moments, listening to the sound of the rain against the metal roof. His routine was always the same: arrive home, take a scalding hot shower, check the Asian markets, and fall asleep with his laptop still open on his chest. It was an organized, predictable life, utterly devoid of anything that could hurt him again. As he got out of the car, something in the darkest corner of the garage caught his peripheral vision. A small shadow that shouldn't have been there. Edward frowned, adjusting his glasses to see better. His steps echoed on the concrete as he approached cautiously, his heart accelerating for reasons he couldn't comprehend. That's when he saw her. A small girl, perhaps 6 years old, was huddled behind his abandoned exercise bikes. Her clothes were drenched and dirty, clinging to her thin body that trembled uncontrollably. Dark brown hair was plastered to her pale face, and her large, wide eyes stared at him with a mix of terror and hope that made something break inside Edward's chest. "Hey, little one," he murmured, crouching slowly to her level. His naturally gruff voice tried to sound as gentle as possible. "How did you get in here?" The girl didn't answer. She just huddled further into herself, like a scared little animal trying to make herself invisible. Edward noticed her tiny fists were clenched, trembling not just from cold, but from a deep fear that seemed to come from a long, long way off. "It's okay," he continued, extending an open hand toward her. "I won't hurt you. What's your name?" Absolute silence. The girl watched him with those enormous eyes, as if she were trying to decide if he was a monster or a savior. Edward felt something stir within his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced in years. It was a protective instinct, urgent and overwhelming. The rain continued to fall outside, creating a melancholy symphony that seemed to amplify the tension of the moment. Edward looked at the drenched, traumatized child, then at the door leading into his empty house. For the first time in decades, a decision wasn't calculated or strategically planned. "Come," he said softly, standing up and extending his hand once more. "And do you need dry clothes and something warm to eat?" The girl hesitated for long seconds that felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she stretched out her cold little hand and touched his fingers. Edward felt an electric shock run through his arm, not from pain, but from a connection he couldn't explain. As he guided her through the garage door toward the house, he had no idea that this simple moment was about to turn his meticulously organized life upside down, revealing secrets that would forever change his understanding of family, love, and destiny. The mansion's interior greeted Edward and the girl with its usual silence, but this time the emptiness felt different, as if the child's presence had altered the very atmosphere of the place. Lights automatically illuminated as they walked through the marble corridors, and Edward realized how intimidating the house must seem through the eyes of a frightened child. "The kitchen's this way," he murmured, more to break the oppressive silence than expecting a response. The girl walked beside him with small, hesitant steps, leaving tiny puddles on the pristine floor. Her large eyes scanned everything around them with a disturbing intensity, as if she were memorizing every detail. In the modern, gleaming kitchen, Edward felt completely out of his depth. When was the last time he'd prepared something other than coffee? He opened the refrigerator, finding only a few basic ingredients the housekeeper kept for the rare occasions he decided to eat at home. "Do you like warm milk?" he asked, turning to the girl. She had positioned herself near the door, as if calculating a possible escape route. When their eyes met, she nodded slightly, the first sign of communication since he found her. Edward heated the milk on the stove, his large hands, accustomed to commanding billion-dollar meetings, trembling slightly as he stirred the golden liquid. The girl watched every movement, her small arms wrapped around her body in a desperate attempt to get warm. "I need to find you some dry clothes," he said, pouring the milk into a child's mug he didn't even know he owned, probably a forgotten gift from an employee. "Can you wait here for a few minutes?" The terror that flashed in her eyes was instantaneous and devastating. Edward saw her lips tremble, as if she were about to speak, but she only shook her head vigorously. The idea of being alone, even for a few moments, was clearly unbearable. "All right," he said quickly, realizing he had touched a deep wound. "You can come with me. We'll find something comfortable." They went upstairs together, the girl maintaining a careful distance, but never losing sight of Edward. In the guest closet, he found some pajamas that visitors had left over the years. He chose the smallest he could find, still far too large for her. "Bathroom," he said, pointing to the adjacent door. "You need to take off those wet clothes and get warm." For the first time, the girl seemed to genuinely hesitate. Her eyes alternated between Edward and the bathroom door, as if she were fighting an internal battle. Edward realized she was afraid to be alone, but also afraid to ask for help. "I'll stay out here," he said gently, sitting on the floor of the hallway and leaning his back against the wall. "I won't leave, I promise. If you need anything at all, just call." The door closed softly. Edward heard the sound of running water and small noises that indicated she was trying to dry off and change. He remained there, staring at the mansion's high ceiling and wondering what invisible force had placed that traumatized child in his path. Minutes later, the door opened and she appeared, enveloped in the huge pajamas, the sleeves completely covering her tiny hands. She looked even smaller and more fragile, but at least she was no longer trembling from cold. Back in the kitchen, Edward watched her drink the warm milk in small, careful sips. Every movement of hers was calculated, as if she were constantly assessing invisible dangers. Who had hurt that child so much? And why had she appeared specifically in his garage? "How did you get in there?" he tried to ask again, his voice softer. "Did someone bring you here?" Her eyes widened again, and Edward saw tears form. She shook her head and whispered the first word he heard from her voice. "No." It was a small, broken voice, laden with a suffering no child should ever know. Edward felt his heart clench in a way he hadn't experienced in years, awakening paternal feelings he believed he didn't possess. The first night was a painful revelation of how unprepared Edward was to care for another person, especially a traumatized child. After getting her to eat some toast and drink more milk, he took her to the guest room, the coziest he could find in the cold, modern mansion. "You can sleep here," he said, turning on the soft lights and adjusting the air conditioning temperature. "The bed is comfortable, and there are extra blankets if you need them." The girl remained standing in the middle of the room, her large eyes scanning every corner with that same disturbing intensity as before. Edward noticed she showed no surprise or curiosity as a normal child would. Instead, she seemed to be mentally cataloging every exit, every piece of furniture, every detail that might be important. "I'll leave the door ajar," he offered, noticing her tension. "And my room is at the end of the hall. If you need anything at all, you can call me." She nodded almost imperceptibly, but didn't move toward the bed. Edward hesitated at the door, feeling he should say something more, do something more, but he didn't know what. His experience with children was absolutely non-existent, and every instinct seemed inadequate. "Good night," he finally said, leaving the room with a heavy heart. In his own room, Edward tried to follow his usual routine, but found it impossible to concentrate on financial reports when a frightened child was sleeping just a few feet away. He caught himself checking the hallway several times just to make sure she was still there, safe. Around 3 in the morning, a sharp cry woke him from a restless sleep. Edward leaped out of bed and rushed down the hall, finding the guest room empty. The bed was unmade, but the girl had disappeared. Panic seized him in a way he hadn't experienced since childhood. "Where are you?" he called, his voice echoing through the silent house. He ran from room to room, turning on lights and searching every corner. The house had never seemed so vast and labyrinthine as in that desperate moment. That's when he remembered the garage. He ran downstairs and opened the door connecting the house to the garage. The automatic lighting revealed a scene that made his heart clench. The girl was huddled in the same corner where he'd found her, trembling and crying silently. "Hey, little one," he said, approaching slowly. "Why did you come back here?" She looked at him with eyes swollen from tears, but didn't respond. Edward knelt beside her, noticing she had brought one of the blankets from the room. It was clear that this place meant something special to her, something he still couldn't comprehend. "Are you scared to sleep inside?" he asked gently. She nodded, wiping her nose on the sleeve of her oversized pajamas. Edward thought for a moment. All the rules of safety and common sense said he should persuade her to return to the warm, comfortable room. But looking at that traumatized child, he realized that sometimes what made sense to adults didn't make sense to a wounded mind. "It's okay," he said, surprising himself. "If you feel safer here, we can stay here tonight." Edward went to get pillows and blankets, setting up an improvised little corner in the garage. It was absurd. A 42-year-old man, owner of $1 billion fortune, sleeping on a cold garage floor to comfort a child he barely knew. But when she curled up in the blankets beside him and finally stopped trembling, Edward felt a strange and profound satisfaction. For the first time in years, he wasn't sleeping alone in his king-size bed, surrounded by the emptiness of a life built solely for work. The girl fell asleep first, her breathing finally calming. Edward remained awake, looking at her serene little face and wondering what secrets that child carried. Why was the garage her refuge? How had she gotten there? And why did he feel an inexplicable connection to her? Morning brought an even more disconcerting discovery. Edward woke with a sore back from sleeping on the garage floor, but found the space beside him empty. The girl had disappeared again, leaving only the warm imprint on the blanket where she had slept. He got up quickly, the panic from the previous night returning in full force. But this time, instead of searching throughout the house, something led him directly to his bedroom. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. His bedroom door was ajar, and when he pushed it open completely, the scene he found left him completely speechless. The girl was there, standing beside his bed, watching him with those large, penetrating eyes. There was no malice in her gaze, only an intense curiosity, as if she was studying something profoundly important. "How did you get in here?" Edward asked, his voice still rough with sleep. She didn't answer, just kept staring at him. That's when he noticed something that made his blood run cold. She knew exactly where his room was. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't searched. She had gone straight to the right place. During breakfast, Edward observed discreetly as she navigated the kitchen with a disturbing familiarity. She knew where the glasses were, opened the correct drawer for a spoon, instinctively avoided the noisy cabinet. Every movement was too precise for a child who supposedly had never been there before. "Have you been in this house before?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Her reaction was immediate and alarming. Her eyes widened with terror, and she shook her head vigorously, spilling milk on the table. "No, no, no," she murmured quickly, the first complete words Edward heard from her. But there was something in her desperate denial that sounded more like fear of admitting the truth than an honest answer. Edward spent the day working from home, a decision he justified to himself as necessary due to the unusual situation. In truth, he couldn't imagine leaving the girl alone. He set up in his office, with a view of the garden, from where he could watch her playing discreetly in the living room. It was during the afternoon that he noticed another odd behavior. The girl completely avoided certain areas of the house. She never approached the library, automatically veered away from the hallway leading to the west wing, and when Edward suggested they explore the sunroom, she recoiled, as if she had seen a snake. "Don't you like plants?" he tried to joke, but she just shook her head and hid behind the sofa. There were specific memories connected to those places, memories that terrified her deeply. Late in the afternoon, while trying to work, Edward heard a noise coming from the living room. He found the girl rummaging through a drawer in the bookshelf, her small fingers searching for something specific. When she saw him, she froze like a child, caught doing something forbidden. "What are you looking for?" he asked, approaching slowly. She quickly closed the drawer and backed away, but Edward had enough time to see that she had found exactly what she was looking for, a small wooden box where he kept some old photos. "You know where things are in this house," Edward said, no longer as a question, but as a realization. "You've been here before, haven't you?" The tears that formed in her eyes were answer enough. Edward knelt to her height, his heart pounding. Who was this child? How did she know his house so intimately? And why had she returned, traumatized and alone, to a place that clearly evoked both fear and familiarity? "It's okay," he said gently, extending his hand. "I'm not angry. I just want to understand." But the girl just shook her head and ran to the garage, leaving Edward alone with more questions than answers, and a growing certainty that her appearance had been no coincidence. Something far larger and more complex was unfolding, and he was only beginning to scratch the surface of a mystery that would change his life forever. The third day brought a revelation that completely changed Edward's perspective on the situation. He had spent the entire night thinking about the girl's disturbing familiarity with his house, and in the morning he made a decision he knew was risky, but necessary. "Little one," he said during breakfast, choosing his words carefully, "I need to make some calls today. Maybe it's best if we call someone to help find your family." The reaction was instantaneous and devastating. The girl dropped her glass of milk, which shattered on the floor, and recoiled against the wall like a cornered animal. Her eyes widened with absolute terror, and she began shaking her head frantically. "No!" she shrieked, her voice sharp with despair echoing through the kitchen. "You can't call! You can't!" Edward approached slowly, hands extended in a reassuring gesture. "It's okay. I won't call anyone if you don't want me to, but I need to understand why." "Not the police," she whispered desperately, the first complete words she spoke without being prompted. "You promised no police." The word police left her lips like poison. Edward felt a chill run down his spine, realizing she wasn't just afraid of strangers. She was specifically terrified by the idea of authorities. Someone had taught that child to fear the very people who should protect her. "Who told you not to talk to the police?" he asked gently, cleaning up the broken glass while she remained plastered to the wall. She pressed her lips together and shook her head, but Edward saw tears streaming down her cheeks. It was obvious that specific instructions were etched into her mind, commands that terrified her just at the thought of disobeying. "No one will call the police," Edward promised, and he felt something clench in his chest as he made that promise. He was officially crossing a complex moral line. He had a clearly traumatized child in his house, without knowing her origin, and now he was promising not to involve the authorities. During the rest of the morning, Edward watched as she gradually calmed down, but remained more vigilant than in previous days. Every noise made her startle. Every phone ring made her tense. She was constantly on high alert, as if expecting someone to come for her at any moment. That's when he decided to do some discreet investigation on his own. While she rested in the living room, Edward locked himself in his office and began searching missing children databases. He spent hours examining photos and descriptions, looking for any girl who matched her appearance. The result was disturbing. There was no official record of a missing child that matched her description, not in the last few days, nor in the last few weeks. It was as if she simply didn't exist in the system, which raised even more troubling questions about her origin. How could a 6-year-old child be completely invisible to authorities? Was she being deliberately kept off official records? And if so, by whom and why? During lunch, Edward tried a different approach. "Oh, do you remember where you lived before?" he asked casually. "Who did you live with?" Her eyes filled with tears again. "Mommy," she whispered so quietly he barely heard her. "I lived with Mommy." "And where is your mommy now?" The question provoked a reaction Edward didn't expect. The girl began to cry, not the loud, dramatic crying typical of children, but silent, adult tears that rolled down her cheeks as she struggled to maintain control. "Mommy said to come here," she managed between sobs. "Said to find. She stopped abruptly, as if she had almost revealed something forbidden. Edward felt his heart quicken. "To find whom, little one?" But she had already shut down again, shaking her head and refusing to speak further. Edward realized she had been instructed on what she could and couldn't say, and these instructions were followed religiously, even in her traumatized state. That afternoon, while watching the girl draw with crayons he had found in a drawer, Edward realized a disturbing truth. He was growing more attached to this mysterious child than he had ever been to anyone in his adult life. The fourth day revealed even more disturbing aspects of the girl's behavior. Edward woke again to find her watching him sleep, but this time he noticed something different. She didn't seem surprised or curious about the surroundings. Her eyes scanned the room with the familiarity of someone who had been there many times before. "Do you always wake up early?" Edward asked, sitting up in bed. It was an attempt to normalize the strange situation of waking up with a child watching him. She nodded and, for the first time, offered information voluntarily. "Mommy woke up early too. For work." "What kind of work did your mommy do?" Her eyes closed for a moment, as if accessing painful memories. "Cleaned houses, big houses like this one." Edward felt his blood run cold. She cleaned this house. The question provoked the now familiar reaction, terror in her eyes and desperate denial. But this time, Edward paid attention to the details. She wasn't denying it because it was a lie. She was denying it because she had been instructed to deny it. During breakfast, Edward decided to test a theory. "How about we take a walk through the house? You can show me which room you like best." She hesitated, but agreed. As they walked through the corridors, Edward closely observed her reactions. In the library, she stopped at the door and whispered, "There were books with pretty pictures here." But when he asked how she knew that, she retreated into fearful silence. In the sunroom, which she had avoided on previous days, her reaction was even more telling. She stopped at the entrance and pointed to a specific corner. The rocking chair used to be there. Edward looked at the empty spot, feeling a chill. There had indeed been a rocking chair in that corner, but he had removed it years ago. "How do you know about the chair?" The tears returned instantly. "I don't know," she murmured. "I don't remember." But Edward knew she remembered perfectly. Someone had ingrained in that child's mind that certain memories were dangerous, that certain knowledge could not be admitted. In the afternoon, while she slept in the living room, Edward decided to search his company's archives. If her mother had worked as a housekeeper, there might be records in the human resources departments of the various properties he owned. It was on a list of employees from 6 years ago that he found something that made his blood run cold. Among the housekeepers hired for the cleaning of his main residence was the name Ana Santos, a 28-year-old woman, with an attached photo that showed physical features strikingly similar to the girl's. Edward studied the photo for long minutes. The eyes were identical, the same curve of the lips, the same delicate line of the chin. It couldn't be a coincidence. But why didn't he remember her? Of course, many employees had passed through his house in 6 years, but such a striking resemblance should have remained in his memory. He checked the employment dates. Ana Santos had been hired in March and abruptly terminated in September of the same year. There was no explanation for the termination, just a terse note: termination by mutual agreement. When the girl woke, Edward observed her with different eyes. "What was your mummy's name?" he asked casually. "Anna," she replied without hesitation. Then her eyes widened as if she had said something forbidden. "Ana Santos." The terror that passed through her little face confirmed everything. Edward felt the world spin around him. This child hadn't appeared in his garage by chance. There was a direct connection between her and his house, a story he couldn't fully remember. That night, as she slept once more in the garage, the only place where she felt safe, Edward remained awake, trying to reconstruct memories from 6 years ago. There was something important he was forgetting, something that would explain not only the girl's presence, but also the terror she showed when talking about certain things. And then, in the early hours of the morning, a fragmented memory began to take shape. A young, beautiful woman working in his house, always very discreet and efficient. A woman who had vanished from his life as silently as she had arrived, but who had apparently left much more behind than he had ever known. The 5th day began seemingly normally, but it would become the dividing line between everything Edward thought he knew about his life and a reality that would forever change his understanding of family and destiny. The girl had spent the morning silently drawing at the kitchen table, using crayons with an intense concentration that caught his attention. "Can I see what you're drawing?" Edward asked, approaching carefully. She had become less tense with him in recent days, but it was still necessary to move slowly so as not to startle her. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed the paper toward him. Edward looked at the drawing and felt the world completely stop around him. It was simple, made with childlike strokes, but unequivocally clear. A stick figure of a small girl holding hands with a tall man in front of a big house. What made his heart nearly stop was the man's face. She had drawn glasses, dark hair, and even the small mole he had on his chin. "Who are these people in the drawing?" Edward asked, his voice coming out weaker than he intended. The girl pointed to the small figure. "Me." Then she pointed to the man. "Daddy." The word hit Edward like a lightning bolt. He stared at the drawing, then at the girl, then back at the paper. The man in the drawing didn't vaguely resemble him. It was unmistakably him, drawn with details that only someone who knew him intimately could know. "Your daddy," Edward repeated, feeling his legs weaken. You know me." Tears began to stream down her face. "Mommy said to find the daddy of the big house. She said Daddy would take care of me if something happened to her." Edward knelt beside the chair, his hands trembling. "What happened to your mommy?" "She's sick," the girl whispered. "Very sick. She said she couldn't take care of me anymore. She said to come here and wait for Daddy to find out." "Find out what?" She looked at him with those large, vulnerable eyes, laden with a truth Edward was not yet prepared to fully face. "That I'm your little girl." The world fragmented around Edward. Memories he had suppressed or simply forgotten began to return like an emotional avalanche. Ana Santos, the beautiful and discreet housekeeper. A few weeks of casual conversations that turned into something deeper. Nights when he came home late and found her still working. Her shy smile, the way her eyes lit up when he entered the room, and then he remembered the last time he saw her. She had seemed different, more distant, as if carrying an enormous burden. She had said she needed to leave, that she had found another job. He hadn't questioned it, after all. Employees came and went constantly in his life. 6 years ago, Edward murmured, more to himself than to her. Your mother worked here 6 years ago. The girl nodded. Mommy said you didn't know about me. She said she left before telling you. Because she was scared. Scared of what? Scared you wouldn't want a little girl you didn't know. The words hit Edward square in the chest, like a sharp blade. He looked at that child, his daughter, and saw not only Anna's physical features, but also some of his own characteristics. The shape of her eyes, the line of her eyebrow, even the way she tilted her head when she thought. Why did she bring you here now? He managed to ask. She didn't bring me, the girl said, her voice growing even smaller. I came alone. Mommy's in the hospital. She said the address so many times I memorized it. She said to come if she didn't come home. Edward felt a wave of panic mixed with an overwhelming tenderness. His daughter, had traversed the city alone, a 6-year-old navigating dangerous streets to get to him because her mother was dying and there was no one else to care for her. How long have you been waiting in the garage? 3 days before you got here. I slept behind the cars and drank water from the faucet. The revelation was like a punch to the gut. She had spent 3 days alone and terrified, waiting for him. And when he finally came home on that rainy night, he had found his own traumatized, desperate daughter. Edward gently pulled her into a hug, feeling how she melted against him for the first time since he found her. And I'm so sorry, he whispered into her hair. I'm so sorry for not knowing, for not being there when you needed me. And at that moment, holding his daughter in his arms, Edward Stone understood that everything in his life had changed forever. The discovery that he was a father transformed Edward into a completely different man. In the hours that followed the revelation, he cancelled all meetings, ignored urgent calls, and dedicated himself entirely to understanding the situation of Anna and his daughter. His daughter. The word still felt strange in his mind, but it carried a devastating mix of terror and a joy he hadn't known was possible. What's the name of the hospital where your mommy is? Edward asked, kneeling to the girl's height. She had become more communicative after revealing the secret she carried, as if an enormous weight had been lifted from her small shoulders. St. Francis Hospital, she replied, wiping her nose on her sleeve. It's far from home. Mommy said she was going for a special treatment. Edward knew the hospital. It was a public institution that treated serious cases, especially cancer. His heart ached imagining Anna alone, sick, worried about her daughter's future. How brave she must have been to keep the pregnancy a secret all these years, and how desperate it must have been to make the decision to send the girl to find him. What's your name, little one? Edward asked, realizing that in all these days he had never discovered this basic information. Sophia, she said timidly. Sophia Stone. Sophia, Edward repeated, testing the name on his tongue. It was beautiful, delicate, perfectly suited for her. That's a beautiful name. She smiled for the first time since he found her, a small, hesitant, but genuine smile. Mommy said she chose it because it means wisdom. She said I would need to be very wise in life. Edward felt a pang of pain imagining Anna, young and alone, raising this extraordinary child. How many nights had she spent awake worrying? How many times had she looked at Sophia and thought about the father the girl didn't know? Sophia, Edward said, choosing his words carefully, I need to go to the hospital to see your mommy. Do you want to come with me? The terror returned instantly to her eyes. What if the police are there? What if someone recognizes me? Edward then realized that Anna had instructed Sophia to hide not only from him, but from any situation that could officially separate them. She had probably feared social workers would take the girl if they discovered she was too ill to care for her daughter. "We won't talk to the police," Edward promised. "We'll just see how your mommy is and talk to her. Do you trust me?" Sophia studied him for long moments, as if weighing all the instructions she had received against the instinct that told her she could trust this man. Finally, she nodded. The drive to the hospital was a surreal experience for Edward. He drove his luxury car with a 6-year-old in the back seat, his daughter, going to meet a woman he had briefly loved and who had raised this child alone for years. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he tried to process all the implications of the situation. Sophia remained quiet during the trip, but Edward saw her in the rearview mirror, watching everything with that characteristic intense attention. She was memorizing the route, preparing for any eventuality, still in survival mode, even knowing she had found her father. At the hospital, Edward felt the full impact of reality. The oncology ward was a place of fragile hopes and silent goodbyes. Sophia automatically grabbed his hand when they entered, and Edward realized that for her, that place represented the possibility of losing the only family she knew. "Room 247, she said quietly, guiding him through the corridors as if she had been there many times before. Edward stopped at the room door, his heart pounding. On the other side of that door was Anna, the woman who had carried and raised his daughter in secret. The woman who had made the most difficult decision of her life by sending Sophia to find him. "Are you ready?" he asked Sophia, who nodded with a courage that seemed too great for her age. When they opened the door, Edward saw Anna for the first time in 6 years and immediately understood why she had sent Sophia to him. She was visibly frail, much thinner than he remembered. But her eyes still held the same sweetness that had drawn him years ago. When Anna saw them enter together, she began to cry. The silence in the hospital room was laden with 6 years of secrets, regrets, and unexpressed love. Anna lay in bed, visibly frail, but her eyes held the same intensity Edward remembered. When she saw Sophia run towards her, her face lit up with a mix of relief and profound sadness. "My little one," Anna whispered, hugging Sophia with a strength that seemed impossible for someone so debilitated. "You made it. You found Daddy." Edward remained standing at the door, emotionally devastated by the scene. Seeing the two of them together, mother and daughter embracing after days of separation, made him understand the magnitude of the sacrifice Anna had made. She had sent her daughter to a stranger, even if that stranger was the biological father, because she knew it was Sophia's only chance for a secure future. "Anna," Edward finally said, approaching the bed, "why didn't you tell me?" Anna looked at him with tear-filled eyes. "Because I was scared," she admitted. "You were my employer, an important, wealthy man. I was just a housekeeper. I thought you'd think I was trying to take advantage of the situation." "That would never have happened," Edward said, his voice heavy with emotion. "You should have given me the chance to choose." "And would you have chosen a life with a housekeeper and a baby?" Anna asked, a sad smile on her lips. "I knew your routine, Edward. 16 hours of work a day, constant travel, a life built solely for business. There was no room for family." Edward couldn't argue because he knew she was right. 6 years ago, he would have panicked at the idea of having a child. He might have offered money, perhaps, but he would hardly have completely changed his life to be a father. "But things could have been different," he said. "Sophia could have grown up knowing her father, and I could have raised a daughter who felt inferior, always questioning why her important father didn't live with her," Anna replied. "I preferred her to grow up knowing she was loved completely by me rather than feeling rejected by you." Sophia, who had been quietly listening to the conversation, finally spoke. "Mummy always said Daddy was a good man, but too busy to have a family. She said maybe one day, when I was big, I could meet him. I never imagined it would be under these circumstances," Anna said. Closing her eyes, the conversation was clearly draining her limited strength. Edward moved closer to the bed. "Anna, what exactly is your condition? Did the doctors say how much time—" "Pancreatic cancer," she interrupted, her voice firm despite her physical weakness. "Advanced stage. The doctors talk in weeks, maybe 2 months at most." The impact of the news hit Edward like a punch to the gut. Sophia was going to lose her mother, and he was going to lose the chance to correct 6 years of paternal absence. But more than that, an extraordinary woman who had raised a wonderful daughter alone was dying. "Is there any experimental treatment? Anything we can try?" Edward asked desperately. Anna smiled tenderly. "I've tried everything possible. That's why I'm here. I spent all my savings, sold everything of value. That's why I sent Sophia to you. There was no one else, Edward. My parents died when she was a baby. I have no siblings. You're the only family she has." Edward felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. It wasn't just a matter of having discovered he was a father. He was becoming solely responsible for a traumatized child who was about to become an orphan. "I want to take care of her," Edward said, surprising himself with the firmness of his own voice. "I want to be the father I should have been from the start." "Are you sure?" Anna asked, studying his face. "Being a father isn't just about giving money and education. Sophia will need love, patience, presence. She'll need you to completely change your life." Edward looked at Sophia, who watched them with those large, vulnerable eyes. "It's already changed," he said. "From the moment I found her in the garage, my life has already completely changed." Anna smiled, and for the first time since they entered the room, Edward saw peace in her eyes. "She's a special girl, Edward. Smart, sensitive, brave, but also traumatized by everything she's been through. She'll need a lot of love and patience." "She'll have it," Edward promised, extending his hand to touch Anna's. "Yeah, I promise I'll take care of her as you did." The days that followed the hospital visit were an emotional roller coaster for Edward. For the first time in his adult life, he woke up thinking about someone other than himself. Sophia had become the center of his universe, but being a father proved more challenging than any billion-dollar negotiation he had ever conducted. "I don't want to wear this outfit," Sophia said on the morning of the 7th day. Refusing the pretty dress Edward had bought for her, it was the first time she had shown any kind of childhood tantrum, and he had no idea how to react. "Why not? It's pretty," Edward said, genuinely confused. In his logical businessman's mind, a pretty, expensive outfit should be automatically accepted. "It's too pretty," Sophia explained with the seriousness of a miniature adult. "Mommy said that very pretty clothes attract attention, and attracting attention is dangerous." Edward felt his heart clench. Even in simple things like choosing clothes, Sophia carried the fears that Anna had instilled in her to keep her safe. He knelt to her height, trying to find the right words. "Sophia, you don't have to hide anymore," he said gently. "Now you're safe with me. You can wear pretty clothes, you can play in the garden, you can be a normal kid." She looked at him with those large, skeptical eyes. "Mommy said rich people don't like poor children. She said I should be invisible if I came here." The observation was like a stab to Edward's chest. Anna had prepared Sophia to be rejected by him. "Your mommy was trying to protect you," he explained. "But now you are my daughter, and you'll never have to be invisible again." During breakfast, now a sacred ritual they shared every morning, Edward tried to establish some routine. He discovered that Sophia had specific preferences. She didn't like orange juice, loved toast with butter, but refused anything that seemed too expensive or elaborate. "Can I turn on the TV?" she asked timidly. "Of course," Edward said, handing her the remote control. Sophia stared at the device as if it were a museum piece. "Didn't you watch TV at home?" "We didn't have one," she admitted. "Mommy said it was too expensive. Sometimes we watched at the neighbor's house, but only cartoons." Edward realized the chasm between his reality and Sophia's. While he owned 5 enormous televisions scattered throughout the house, his daughter had grown up without access to the most basic entertainment. How many other simple things had she missed because of Anna's financial situation? "Want to choose a channel?" he offered. Sophia navigated the channels with curiosity, stopping on a cartoon. Edward sat beside her on the sofa, watching her eyes light up with the bright colors of the screen. "Daddy," Sophia suddenly said, using the word naturally for the first time. Edward felt a wave of emotion so intense that he had to blink several times to hold back tears. "Yes. Are you going to leave me when Mommy goes to heaven?" The question hit Edward like a lightning bolt. Sophia, at 6 years old, had already understood that Anna was dying, and her greatest fear was not death itself, but the abandonment that might follow. "Never," Edward said, pulling her closer. "You're my daughter forever. No matter what happens, I will always take care of you. Promise. I promise." That afternoon, when they visited Anna again, Edward noticed how she had visibly worsened in just 2 days. Sophia noticed too, clinging to her mother's hand with silent desperation. "How are you two adjusting?" Anna asked, trying to keep her tone light despite her condition. "Sophia is teaching me how to be a dad," Edward said, trying to smile. "It's been an interesting experience." Anna laughed, a weak but genuine sound. "She was always my teacher too. Children have this ability to teach us things we didn't know we needed to learn." "Mommy," Sophia said suddenly, "can I ask something?" "Of course. My love, why didn't you tell Daddy about me when I was born?" Anna exchanged a look with Edward. "Because sometimes adults make mistakes trying to protect the people they love," she said carefully. "I thought I was doing what was best for you and for him." "But is it all right now?" Sophia asked. Edward reached out and touched his daughter's face. "It's all right now," he said, and for the first time since he found her, he truly believed those words. The second week of Edward's new life as a father was interrupted by an unexpected knock at the door. It was a quiet Saturday morning, and Sophia was finally beginning to behave like a normal child, laughing, playing, even getting into some innocent mischief that filled the house with life. "Stay here," Edward told Sophia when he heard the doorbell. Something in the formal, insistent tone of the knock put him on alert. Sophia, with her keen instincts for danger, immediately hid behind the sofa. Opening the door, Edward found 2 social workers, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression and a young man carrying a bulky folder. "Mr. Edward Stone?" the woman asked. "I'm Dr. Marcia Jenkins from Child Protective Services, and this is my colleague, John Miller. We received an anonymous tip about a child being irregularly kept on this property." Edward felt his blood run cold. "A tip? According to information we received, you are harboring a minor without proper documentation or legal authorization," Dr. Jenkins continued. "We need to verify the situation and, if necessary, take the child to a temporary shelter while we investigate." "She's my daughter," Edward said, trying to remain calm despite the panic growing in his chest. "Do you have documents to prove that, sir? Birth certificate? Legal custody? Anything official?" Edward realized with horror that he had none of that. Sophia was not registered in his name. There were no legal documents establishing his paternity. In the eyes of the law, he truly was keeping an unknown child in his house. "The situation is complicated," he tried to explain. "Her mother is hospitalized, and—" "Mr. Stone," Dr. Jenkins interrupted. "Regardless of the circumstances, the law is clear. A child cannot remain in someone's care without proper documentation. We need to see the girl now." Edward blocked the entrance with his body. "She's traumatized. Any abrupt change could worsen her emotional state." "We understand your concern," John Miller, the younger social worker, said, trying a more conciliatory tone, "but we are here precisely to protect the child's well-being." From inside the house, Edward heard a scream of terror. Sophia had recognized the voices and was clearly in a panic. The sound tore at his heart. It was the same kind of primal fear she had shown when he mentioned the police. "No!" Sophia shrieked from inside the house. "Don't let them take me! Daddy, promise you won't let them!" His daughter's desperate voice awakened something fierce and protective in Edward. "She's scared," he said firmly. "I won't allow them to traumatize her further." "Mr. Stone, Doctor," Jenkins said, her voice hardening, "if you do not cooperate, we will have to call the police to accompany us. That will only make the situation more difficult for everyone." Edward realized he was in an impossible situation. If he resisted, Sophia would be taken by force, which would be devastating for her. If he cooperated, he would lose his daughter to a bureaucratic system that wouldn't understand the emotional complexity of the situation. "Can I at least explain the situation to her?" Edward pleaded. "She needs to understand what's happening." 5 minutes, Dr. Jenkins conceded. Edward went back into the house and found Sophia hiding under the dining room table, trembling violently. Her eyes were wide with absolute terror, and she shook her head repeatedly. "Sophia," he said softly, kneeling beside the table, "I need to talk to you." "You said you'd never leave me," she accused, her voice broken with tears. "You promised." "And I won't leave you," Edward said, extending his hand. "But sometimes adults have complicated rules. These people just want to make sure you're safe." "I don't want to go," Sophia cried. "I want to stay with you. I want to stay with Daddy." Edward felt tears burning his eyes. "I will fight for you, Sophia. I will do everything it takes to bring you back. I promise." "Mr. Stone, Dr. Jenkins called from the doorway. "Time's up." Edward looked at his daughter, then at the social workers waiting at the door. It was the hardest decision of his life. Traumatize Sophia by allowing them to take her, or traumatize her even more by resisting until they brought the police. "Sophia," he said, his voice heavy with emotion, "remember when your mommy taught you to be brave?" She nodded through her tears. "I need you to be brave now, for a short time. Daddy will fix everything and come get you soon, very soon. Promise." "I promise with my life." Watching Sophia being led away by the social workers was the most painful experience Edward had ever lived. She looked back through the window of the official car, her silent tears breaking his heart into 1,000 pieces. Edward remained standing at the door until the car disappeared, then ran for the phone. He had work to do. Edward turned into an obsessed man. In the 48 hours that followed Sophia's removal, he mobilized every resource at his disposal as never before. Lawyers worked in shifts, private investigators scoured documents, and Edward used every influential contact he had to expedite processes that would normally take months. "I need an urgent paternity test," he told Dr. Martinez, his most seasoned attorney, during a 2 a.m. meeting in his office. "And I want the temporary custody documentation ready for when the result comes out." "Edward, even with all our contacts, that takes at least a week," Dr. Martinez explained. "And we still have to deal with the fact that you kept the child without notifying the authorities." "I don't care," Edward said, his voice laced with fierce determination. "Find a way, pay whatever it takes, call in whatever favors you need to call in. My daughter is in a shelter, traumatized and thinking I abandoned her." While the lawyers worked, Edward did something he had never done. He personally visited the shelter where Sophia was. He couldn't see her yet. The rules were strict, but he managed to speak with the coordinator. "How is she doing?" Edward asked, his heart aching. "She's not adjusting well," admitted the coordinator, a kind, elderly woman named Sister Clara. "She doesn't speak to anyone, refuses to eat, spends all day drawing the same picture, a man and a girl holding hands." Edward clenched his fists. "She needs to understand that I didn't abandon her." "Mr. Stone," Sister Clara said gently, "I see many children pass through here. This girl isn't reacting like a child who was separated from a stranger. She's reacting like a child who lost her father." The nun's words confirmed what Edward already knew. Sophia had attached herself to him with the same intensity he had attached himself to her. They were a true family, not just biologically, but emotionally. On the 3rd day, Edward received a call that changed everything. "Edward, Anna's weak voice came through the hospital phone. "I heard what happened to Sophia. Anna, I'm so sorry. I'm doing everything I can to bring her back. I need to tell you something," she said, her breathing labored. "About Sophia's birth certificate." Edward felt his heart quicken. "What about it?" I put your name as the father." Edward almost dropped the phone. "What?" "When she was born, I was scared and confused, but at the last moment, I wrote your name on the certificate. I thought if something happened to me, at least there would be an official record linking the two of you." "Are you saying that legally I'm already her father?" "Yes," Anna whispered. "The certificate is kept in a safe deposit box at the First National Bank, downtown branch. The number is 1247. The key is inside a copy of The Great Gatsby in my house on page 50. Edward was in complete shock. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I was afraid you'd be angry that I used your name without permission. But now Sophia needs you, and you have legal rights to her." Edward hung up the phone and immediately called Dr. Martinez. "I found the birth certificate. Sophia is already registered under my name." 2 hours later, Edward was at the simple house where Anna had raised Sophia. It was a modest place but full of love. Photos of Sophia smiling covered the walls, children's drawings taped to the refrigerator, toys neatly arranged. He found the key exactly where Anna had said. At the bank, the birth certificate confirmed everything. Sophia Stone, daughter of Ana Santos and Edward Stone. "With this document, we can request immediate custody," Dr. Martinez said, studying the paper. "Though you are legally her father from birth." The emergency hearing was scheduled for the afternoon of the same day. Edward had never felt so nervous, not even in his biggest negotiations. This time, he wasn't fighting for money or power. He was fighting for his family. "Your Honor," Dr. Martinez said to the judge, "my client was not irregularly keeping a child. He was exercising his paternal rights over his legally registered daughter." The prosecutor tried to argue that Edward should have notified the authorities, but the judge was pragmatic. A father caring for his own daughter does not constitute a crime. The child must be returned immediately to the petitioner. When Edward arrived at the shelter with the court order, Sophia was sitting alone in the courtyard, drawing. Seeing him, she dropped the crayon and ran, throwing herself into his arms with a force that almost knocked him over. "Daddy!" she cried, crying and laughing at the same time. "You came for me! I knew you would!" "I promised I would," Edward said, holding her as if he would never let her go. And a father's promises are sacred. In the car, on the way home, Sophia held his hand tightly. "Daddy, now you'll never leave me again." "Never again," Edward promised. "We're family forever." And for the first time since he found her in the garage, Edward knew that there was nothing more that could separate them. The 3 weeks that followed Sophia's return were the most intense and transformative of Edward's life. He had completely changed his routine, delegating most business responsibilities to dedicate himself fully to fatherhood. Sophia blossomed each day, gradually shedding the fears and traumas she carried. But both knew that a painful moment was approaching. Anna was visibly weaker with each hospital visit. Her strength was rapidly depleting, but she insisted on spending every possible moment with Sophia, creating memories her daughter could keep forever. "Mommy, are you very tired?" Sophia asked during a visit, noticing how Anna breathed with difficulty. "A little, my love," Anna admitted, stroking her daughter's hair. "But I'm always happy whenever you come to see me." Edward watched these interactions with a broken heart. He had grown to love Anna in a different way than he had felt years ago. Now it was love for who she had become, for the extraordinary mother she was, for the courageous woman who had raised his daughter alone. "Anna," Edward said, when Sophia left to get water in the hallway, "I want you to know that I'll tell her everything when she grows up, about how brave you were, about how you loved me enough to give me a second chance, about how you were a perfect mother." "I wasn't perfect," Anna said, smiling faintly. "I made mistakes. The biggest was not telling you about her from the beginning. You did what you thought was best with the information you had, Edward replied, and look at the result. Sophia is extraordinary. You should be proud. I am, Anna whispered, and I'm at peace knowing she has you now. That night, back home, Sophia asked a question Edward knew would eventually come. Daddy, is Mommy really going to die? Edward had talked with child psychologists about how to approach this topic. Yes, little one, she's very sick, and the doctors can't help her anymore. Sophia absorbed the information with an impressive maturity for her age. When she dies, will I only have you? You'll never be alone, Edward promised. And you'll always have Daddy to take care of you. And you won't die too. The question revealed Sophia's deepest fear. After losing her mother, also losing her newly found father, I'll live a long time to take care of you, see you grow up, graduate, get married, have children. I promise. In the 4th week, Anna entered critical condition. Edward and Sophia rushed to the hospital where they found doctors trying to stabilize her. When they finally could see her, she was too weak to speak, but her eyes still sparkled at seeing her daughter. Mommy, Sophia said, holding Anna's hand, I want you to know that I'll be a good girl for Daddy. I'll study hard and make you proud. Anna weakly squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered, You've already made me proud every day of your life. Edward approached the bed. Anna, thank you for giving me the most precious thing in the world. I promise to honor your memory by being the best father I can be. Anna looked at him with profound gratitude, then at Sophia. With immense effort, she managed to whisper, Take care of each other. Those were her last words. Ana Santos died silently the following morning, with Edward and Sophia sleeping in chairs beside her bed. The funeral was simple, but touching. Sophia, dressed in a blue dress Anna had chosen, held Edward's hand tightly throughout the ceremony. She didn't cry. She seemed to understand that her mother was finally at peace, free from the pain that had consumed her. Is she happy now? Sophia asked when they returned home. She is, Edward said, and she's proud of you for being so brave. That night, Sophia slept in Edward's bed for the first time, needing to feel that she wasn't alone in the world. Edward remained awake for a long time, protecting his daughter's sleep and silently thanking Anna for giving him not just a child to love, but a reason to become the best version of himself. The mansion that once echoed only with silence now resonated with laughter, conversations, and the sound of a true family. And Edward knew that this was just the first page of a story that would last a lifetime. 3 months after that rainy night that changed everything, Edward woke up not to the sound of his alarm, but to laughter coming from the garden. He looked out the window and saw Sophia playing with the butterflies, visiting the flowers they had planted together the week before. She wore a yellow dress. Now she loved colorful clothes, and her hair shone under the morning sun. The transformation had been gradual but profound. The scared girl who hid in the garage had become a joyful, confident child, full of curiosity about the world. And Edward, the workaholic businessman who avoided emotional ties, had discovered that being a father was the most rewarding and transformative experience of his life. "Daddy!" Sophia cried when she saw him at the window. "Come see, the flowers we planted are growing." Edward went down to the garden, where Sophia pulled him by the hand to show him each new leaf that had sprouted. She had become his little teacher about life's simple joys, how important it was to stop and watch a flower bloom or laugh for no specific reason. "They're beautiful," Edward said, genuinely admiring the tiny sprouts. "I think they'll produce very beautiful flowers." "Mommy said people are like plants," Sophia said, her voice serene. "They need love and care to grow beautiful." Edward smiled, touched by Anna's wisdom that continued to live through her daughter's words. "Your mommy was very wise." "She was," Sophia agreed. "And she was right about you too." "What did she say about me?" "That you had a big heart, but it was bruised and hidden. She said that when you found true love, you would be the best daddy in the world. Edward felt tears prick his eyes. Anna had seen potential in him that he himself didn't know he possessed, and through Sophia, she had given him the chance to discover who he truly could be. During breakfast, now a sacred ritual they shared every morning, Sophia announced, "Daddy, I want to have a party." "What kind of party?" "A party to celebrate our family," she said, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "We can invite the people who like us." Edward realized that Sophia was right. They had become a real family, and that deserved to be celebrated. "I think that's a wonderful idea. Who do you want to invite?" "Sister Clara from the shelter, Dr. Martinez who helped us, Nurse Rose from the hospital who was kind to Mommy, and you can invite your friends too." The party happened the following weekend. Edward discovered he had more loved ones in his life than he imagined. Employees who became friends, neighbors he had neglected, colleagues who admired him not just professionally, but personally. Sophia was the perfect hostess, introducing everyone as Daddy's family and excitedly talking about her gardening and drawing projects. Edward proudly watched how his daughter had learned to be sociable and affectionate. "She's special," Sister Clara commented, watching Sophia distribute brownies they had made together. "She has an inner light that illuminates any room." "She taught me that family isn't about perfection," Edward said. "It's about being present, about choosing to love every day." That night, after everyone had left, Edward and Sophia sat on the porch, watching the stars. The garage, where it had all begun, had been transformed into an art studio where Sophia created her colorful works and Edward discovered he had a talent for carpentry. "Daddy," Sophia said, nestling against him, "do you know the best part about having a family?" "What?" "It's that even when we're sad, we're not alone." Edward kissed the top of her head, feeling deep gratitude for everything that had happened. The loneliness that had haunted him for decades had been replaced by a fullness he never thought possible. "Sophia," he said, "thank you for finding me that night." "Thank you for letting me stay," she replied. As the stars shone above them, Edward reflected on how sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive in the most unexpected moments. A scared little girl in the garage had become his greatest blessing, transforming an empty house into a home filled with love. The rain falling that first night had washed away his old life, allowing a new story to begin. And this new story, written hand in hand between a learning father and a brave daughter, promised to be the most beautiful of all. Sophia fell asleep right there, in Edward's arms, with a serene smile on her face. Edward remained awake for a long time, protecting his daughter's sleep and silently thanking Anna for giving him not just a child to love, but a reason to become the best version of himself. The mansion that once echoed only with silence now resonated with laughter, conversations, and the sound of a true family. And Edward knew that this was just the first page of a story that would last a lifetime.